I assumed leaving care would be the light at the end of the tunnel for me. It's a complete disaster.
When you turn 18 years old, you are now expected to all of a sudden miraculously have all of the skills for independence.
I would argue that I hear what you're saying, and I agree that there should be more value placed on the leaving care service and the workers within it. But
then there is a characteristic that I think an aftercare advisor needs, and that's the characteristic of the hustle.
I had 1 million foster carers, thousands of social workers, but only one aftercare advisor.
What's your alternative?
Yeah.
Welcome to Conversations That Care, the podcast brought to you by the Care Leaders. I'm Luke Rodgers, and joining me is Karyell Phillips. Today's episode
7, we look at the cliff edge of leaving care. Today we're talking about leaving care.
The disaster that is leaving care.
Yeah, I wanted to unpack that actually, because you didn't say that just before the podcast. Like, why is leaving care a disaster?
No, and so this is the key point, right? It's the disaster of leaving care. It's twofold. The disaster, I can't wait to leave care. So for those of you who haven't listened before, I've always spoken about that I assumed leaving care would be the light at the end of the tunnel for me. You know, I spent all my time in care just wanting to leave. Literally, physically, emotionally, just felt that if I wasn't here in this space, I could grow, I could develop, I could reflect, I could heal, all these things. I didn't find care or my care journey, the space for the healing from the trauma as to why I ended up in care. Instead, it became additional trauma after trauma after trauma. And so I never had that. So I just wanted to leave. And so I thought leaving care was going to be that break for me. And actually, it was a complete disaster. I wasn't prepared. I wasn't ready. I was lonely. I was isolated. I was, if for want of a better term, but absolutely broken. I wasn't even in a space to start healing and all those things. But equally, the disaster that is leaving care is also the disaster of leaving care, right? The quick get out, you're no longer an issue for us. You're no longer a problem for us. Is how it feels. I'm sure there's millions of amazing aftercare advisors that don't think or feel like that, but just the space in which young people are now finding themselves in. The rest of the world also looks like that. Housing looks like that, in terms of, hello, you're old enough now, so therefore you're 18. In my instance, it was 16. But, for 18-year-olds, you're 18, you should know better, you should be able to do. The expectation that all this should be happening. There was a joke I heard somebody saying before, and they meant it lighthearted, but it was supposed to be like a little bit of a dig, or you don't even know how to boil an egg. And it always stuck with, nobody said it to me, but it always stuck with me because I didn't know how to boil an egg. Nobody had ever, and it was really complex. Boiling an egg is not easy. Do you know how many eggs I've unshowered and they've just...
It's actually, once at boiling point, 6 minutes exactly to get slightly...
Luke, I just do 10 minutes for the sake of everything now.
It's a big, hard,
I like
rock-hard centre.
Maybe we should do a podcast on how eggs should be cooked, because I come from if it's soggy in the middle, it's not properly cooked egg.
Fair. So you wouldn't like sunny side up?
Absolutely. What is one of them? No. All these small skills that we assume people should know in order to survive in the world, I didn't know them.
Right.
I didn't know them. So yeah, that's the disaster.
Unpacking a few things that you've said, because I think I agree. Leaving care is the disaster of leaving care. You've communicated expectation. So there is this expectation within maybe society, but that when you turn 18 years old, you are now expected to all of a sudden miraculously have all of the skills for independence, which you don't. Actually, it is a cliff edge, and many people, everyone listening to this that's involved in social care will know that it is a cliff edge. For those that aren't involved in social care, our distant cousins, our supporters, our family friends, like when a young person turns 18, they essentially lose their care order, and then the support that then surrounds them falls away, or it was never there in the first place. I want to look a few things. One of them is so you've got the expectation, the system around leaving care. Now, I'm going to go into this conversation, I'm going to caveat it at the end.
Okay.
To support a child in care, you have to have a social work qualification. to support a child leaving care, you don't. Now, that doesn't mean that a social work qualification makes you any better, but what the system is presenting there is that actually there is so much more that you need to support a young person in care. We value more. Whereas if you're leaving care, you don't need that kind of valuable thing. And I think that young people leaving care require a lot more support than children in care. And I'll explain why.
I'll give you a chance.
Yeah, I suppose it's different. So my caveat on that is that it doesn't mean because you've got a degree it makes you any better.
Yeah.
That's not what it's caveat. But what I'm explaining is that the system is presenting that actually, there is more value in supporting a child in care than in leaving care because, a degree is a form of value. It's a token. Leaving care, you've got to think about family integration. You've got to think about independence skills. You've got to think about your education, your employment, your training. You've got to think about housing. All of a sudden, your individual responsibilities become significantly bigger than when you're in care, when you're psychologically bubble wrapped, when decisions are made for you. All of a sudden, so I would argue that you need more support leaving care by more experienced and qualified people that are engaged deeper within the community. So you were talking on an earlier podcast about community hubs. I think for leaving care, that could be a great concept.
Just to add to that, because I hear what the point you're making, but my argument would be that actually, unlike care and the care journey, nobody's ever experienced that unless you're in care or you're the social worker, right? And so the need for a qualified professional to navigate that space is absolutely crucial in terms of law and legislation and, just the removal of rights from people and families and the intervention in families. So absolutely crucial. I would argue that I hear what you're saying and I agree that there should be more value placed on the leaving care service and the workers within it. But I think the idea is that we've all experienced adulthood or transition into. And so does it require a degree in that regard? Because it's almost like school, right? We've all experienced education. And so the idea is because we've all done it, it's easy to talk about. And so yes, we haven't all experienced leaving care, but I think the idea stems from, at some level, we've all experienced transition into adulthood. And so how do you quantify that in a qualification sense compared to the social worker?
Good serve. So to serve back,
go for it.
To use education, like we've all experienced education, but you still need to be a qualified teacher to teach. And so I think what we're coming to the point of is that, like, I suppose, there isn't actually a qualification to prepare yourself for independence. That doesn't exist. I'm absolutely sure, now we've spoke about it out loud, if there was a degree on supporting people into independence, you would expect that social care would make sure that was a requirement for the role. So maybe what it is here is that there isn't actually the qualification available. No. So that's potentially why.
But it doesn't make it any less valuable because one has, one doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Because that qualification over here in that care bit is absolutely crucial because we are navigating a legal matter. We're navigating families, children, and the removal of over here. But I hear what you're saying, the understanding of, because whilst everybody, you caveated that, or you came back with, but you have to have a teaching qualification to teach education, which is perfect because actually in the aftercare world, maybe there's just more understanding and why children and young people feel let down because actually people have transitioned into adulthood. They haven't all been homeless. They haven't all had to cook for themselves. They haven't all not been prepared for living alone. They haven't all had to do their first shop by themselves or decorate their own property. They haven't had to they haven't all had to do that. And so, what do we do about those people that don't know that part?
Yeah. So I think that, and I say this confidently, and I've facilitated training on this. Lived experience training is worth saying is that I think we need to be a bit more honest with the young people about what's going to happen. So we live in this idealistic, hopeful space, which is great, that we really want leaving care to be good for young people, and we sit in that hope. And I think it's that's the thing that we hold on to, which is great. But the reality is, leaving care is a cliff edge. Young people leave too soon and they leave without the right support. They lose their relationships. Yeah. We know that happens. Yeah. So I think that this blissful ignorance through our thoughts of going, I hope that the transition will be good. We create this blissful ignorance of what happens. I think we need to start having tougher conversations with the young people. And for me, there's a few inevitables of social care. inevitable number one is that social care cannot provide forever families,
Right.
because those family placements come to an end. And also, those families they have a system in place that allows them to bring placements to an end. So the system can't say we provide you with a forever family.
They can't guarantee it, but it does happen. So I'm thinking of my foster carers have become my forever family.
So
do you see what I'm saying?
I am.
Yeah.
So I'll come to the point is that is the choice of the individual. The system can't say we're going to give you a forever family because
They've got no control over it. Okay.
Because it comes to an end.
Yeah.
So it's the same with
time limited.
It's exactly the same with permanent relationships. And then there is this kind of like caveat of independence. And I think that one of the things that we need to start saying is that inevitably the system comes to an end. The conversation I think that we need to start having with young people as early as possible is this reality. Now, there is obviously, you're not going to go to a young person and say, by the way, you're going to lose all of the family that you've got, all of the support, and then you're going to completely drop off the end of a cliff at 18 years old because they're going to be, frightened about that whole realistic expectation.
Whilst living in care.
So I think that we need to be doing things as early as possible to prepare them for their independence, which is the responsibility of the placements. It's responsibility of the social worker. We need to start giving them more independence from a younger age to prepare them for this. The reason that why we don't give them more independence and more freedom is because of the safeguard and the risk around young people having more independence at such a young age. And I'll give you an example. A charity that we once worked with, really innovation program. Founder of this charity, it's called the House Projects, Tony Clifford. Like great program.
Tony. Hey, Tony.
Amazing project. From 16 to 18, a young person was living in a high-cost residential placement, and at 18 years old, when they left, their outcomes were incredibly poor.
Yeah.
So Tony's idea for the House Project was that from 16 to 17, a young person renovated a house, social housing. From 17 to 18, they moved into that house, and then what we saw was a huge impact for these young people, significant impact, no reduction in criminal activity, increase in education, employment and training, no tenancy breakdowns, and it was cheaper.
Yeah.
The challenge on that particular thing was, well, you're moving in these kids to these houses at 17 years old. That's too young.
Yeah.
So you're always going to be hit with this, but what's your alternative?
Yeah.
All right, we'll keep them in social care until they're 18.
Yeah.
They'll fall off the edge of a cliff and then we've completely failed them. So for me, we need to start to think more innovatively about how we provide young people independent skills, give them more ownership, give them more opportunity to do stuff at the youngest age possible.
I mean, look, in any other parenting relationship, the idea would hopefully be that children are successfully prepared for moving on. I think there's a slight problem with your hopeful idea, which is great, is that it doesn't allow for return when things do go wrong. And I think that should be more of a focus rather than early stages of preparing kids for living on their own. That actually combined with that, there's also almost like a get out of jail free card, right? That if it don't work though, guess what? There is a way back. That there is like
the sofa to go and fall asleep on at a house.
And so we keep, I don't know how that looks because I'm just talking on the spot here, but when we think about when children and young people successfully transition from home, parents' home, a good quality caring home, when they transition into adulthood, it's not they were successful because mum started teaching them how to work the washing machine at age 5. It was successful because if it goes wrong, you can always come back.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it successful because we don't see how many times they came back. We just see they're now successfully transitioned into adulthood. And so I think the magic there is there's an option to return. And I don't know what that, maybe it's the House Project or projects like that.
But there are two schemes that I suppose have in some way tried to do that, which is staying put and staying close.
But equally, I'd argue they're not options for return. They're options that if you are in education right now, you can remain.
Yeah.
But equally, there's no option for, no, I'm ready to live on my own. Take Karyell, 16, I'm ready. Let me go out there. No, I'm not ready. There's no recourse to come back. I can't come back. It's you've made the decision. We told you not to. That's the part I'm talking about. It's that if it doesn't work, and I'm talking post-18 here, which is going to cause people to go in a right ruckus. But how does that work around? But I'm even talking right up until 24 that we create services where there's option to return.
Well, people will go through that space because quite simply they're thinking, well, at 18 years old, their legal status comes to an end, therefore our responsibility comes to an end with it. It brings us back to an earlier conversation we're having, an earlier podcast about a child-focused system or a human-focused system. Is that if we say we want a care experience, a young person's focused system,
and we're invested in,
then these are the ideas we need to explore. Where it isn't a child-focused system is because what happens is we go, oh well, at 18 years old,
so it doesn't matter.
Or at 18 years old, our responsibility's over. It doesn't make that the right thing. It might be the right way to do something. It doesn't make it the right thing. So
Also, I just want to just put a point out there. Legal responsibilities don't end. The care order might end because the child is now legally an adult. But the responsibilities of the corporate parent do not end for those qualifying care leavers and so forth. So that would not end. There still is a reasonable, but it's advisory based, right? You're a source of advisement rather than you're returning to, you can provide all that care. And that maybe needs to be changed.
Yeah. Let's, on the innovation idea, which in its shame shouldn't be an innovation idea, but that's what it would be called. You've just set up a service, and what happens is a young person, they leave care, but they have the option to go back to crash on the sofa. They've always got a space there if needed.
I'd be arguing that that's what I'd be using residential homes for. So for those that didn't listen to our previous podcast, when we was talking about placements and where we stand on residential care, we already see it works, right? Because we're no longer, unlike me when I was 7 in a children's home, we're no longer, hopefully, placing 7-year-olds in children's homes because we recognise that there are more benefits to them being in a supported, consistent placement with particular caregivers, right? Who are consistent and regular. And so we're seeing particular age groups of children and young people being placed in residential settings.
Leaving care. Let's focus on leaving care.
But so my point is that maybe we could be using that same setup for the leaving care. It wouldn't be a case of, because then you're asking independent, self-employed foster carers to commit to keeping a bed space open, and that wouldn't work.
That was one of the problems with the staying close and staying put specifically. So, you've got this concept of a young person leaving care, going into education. This is the other thing, is they put so many criteria on you accessing this support that it becomes like you have to be in education, you have to be all of this kind of stuff to access it. So, even though that the government changed, you've been able to have a support worker until 25, is it, when you're leaving care? Aftercare advisor till 25.
If you
I remember when that first came out. I don't know if it's the case now. I've not stayed into loop, but I remember there being so many dynamics and criteria for being able to access that. And one of the challenges with staying put was that there was a reduction in the fee for the foster carer for that young person.
Yeah.
So therefore, if a foster carer is used to being paid the allowance that they're paid for a child in care, and then to keep that open, they get a reduction in pay, but they're still having to keep that space open and absolutely run their home.
And sometimes they can't have additional children because now you've got an 18-year-old who has to be assessed as an adult.
So when you look at this, it's like on the face of things, it sounds, oh, wow, foster carers looking after children beyond 18 years old. This is amazing. But when you start to pull away that kind of glossy label and look beneath it, it's actually quite a bit of a mess.
I'd be interested to know how successful over the years now, if there's any studies longitudinal that have actually followed and tracked that since its implementation to, has it made any difference? Has there been any success? And it might not be, because again, it's only going to focus on a particular group of children, young people that did stay in education, which is a shame. But I'd just be interested to know exactly whether it has been successful or not.
Well, from what I remember, if I remember this correctly, I was staying put.
Oh, was you?
Yeah, and I think I was on the pilot. I was on the pilot.
Nice.
I was on the pilot for everything. I was the guinea pig. I remember treatment foster care, which is... Yeah. We're not talking about foster care. Plus, we don't have enough time for that one.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Care. So,
but I remember the staying put. And I remember when college came to an end, which also to actually be at college for me was a fight, because when I was at college, I started a year late So that all messed up the system, because I was like, now I'm past 18 when I'm in my second year. I didn't do very well in my second year because of instability in my personal life, which we know is the case. You have instability at home, you see instability in school. So then when I get into my third year and I was fighting the college to let me resit my second year. They were like, you can't, you have to pay £400 per A-level because you've actually already got an A1 or whatever it was at the time, not an A2 or an AS.
Yeah.
So because you've got that qualification, you can't have education for free now. You have to pay for it.
You've already got a level 3.
I'm fighting with my local authority, say, pay for it, please pay for it. You know, what actually happened was I had an exceptional college who recognised and understood the situation that I was going through, dropping protected characteristics here and, you know, discrimination, positively discriminated, and were like, we're going to allow you to reset your third year. But then what happened was that my placement at home was under scrutiny, under fire, because, I'm in college, but I shouldn't have been in college because the local authority not offering it. You know, did they continue paying this placement? And it became an extremely challenging place, to the point where when I left care, what actually happened was I ended up moving in with somebody that I met and lived with them and their family. One of my best friends called Joey, and proud to say his name out loud on the podcast. You know, met me in town, understood my situation, invited me back to his house, and I lived with his family, and his family remained my family to this day. Yeah. You know, I was only meant to stay a couple of nights, and I've spent years with them. I moved houses with them. And for me, like, that is actually the experience of leaving care for, you know, lots of people, is that they meet individuals that make the choice to continue that support with the person. And the people that have made the most significant difference in my life, hands down, are people that I met when I left care, that have got nothing to do with care.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, like people, just human beings that are like...
As opposed to the aliens in care?
Yeah, well... Okay, let me confirm and clarify that. Yeah. Like, I mean... I stand by what I'm saying. Like, I suppose let's not make a comparison. Yeah. But let's just say that these people that I met when I left care, they cared for me because they had a will, and that they wanted to do it. And in no way whatsoever was like a payment or it was just caring people that saw a human in need and were like, you know, and I would love to see a world like that. I would love to see the culture of my experience from the people after care be injected into care, where we have these great individuals that are just like, you know,
and I do
not that they're not good. You know what I'm saying?
And I do think they do exist, because I do think in that leaving care sphere as well, one of the things, just two things actually, because I do think we need to give a little bit of a acknowledgement to that there are children who are looked after in care that are experiencing that leaving care reality. And I say that I'm thinking in particular unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who are considered looked after children, right, because of their age and stage, and they're here without a parent who has PR, and yet they are living the life that care leavers, that you and I had to live, which is that forced independence very quick, that, you know, that they're not all in families and fostering families, or instead they're in, and it's not even residential type settings. Whilst it is residential, it's more that supported living accommodation type. And just what that feels like for them, being looked after, but whilst equally experiencing some of those hardships of a care leaver or an older young person would be. But I just think the leaving care part as well is around advisors. You know, those aftercare advisors can be powerful people. I know mine was. I only had one, which was amazing. And I don't know what the experience is for everybody else, but I had a million foster carers, you know, thousands of social workers, but only one aftercare advisor. So I don't know what the pattern or the method or the approach is there, but my aftercare advisor stuck with me throughout the whole thing. And that's something maybe we need to relook at in terms of what happens there, because that relationship, whilst absolutely, of course, aftercare advisors are in situations where they don't have all the information, you know, outside of my care experience, having worked with aftercare advisors who are supporting young people through that transition, they don't know. And I did find myself in a way having to talk them through the housing side of life and talk them through the financial side of stuff. And I get you can't know everything, but when that's your main focus and aim.
I'm glad that we're moving there, because I honestly, to give aftercare advisors, PAs, a space, or let's not point the finger over there for a second,
100%.
and let's just look at the system.
Yeah.
So I think that's the responsibility of the local authority to provide appropriate, adequate training to ensure that these individuals understand how to navigate the benefit system, how to access housing, how to teach
council related, right?
young people appropriate independence skills, how to be able to be experts at financial management. However you teach an 18-year-old how to manage their money, because how I believe 18-year-old manages their money is by spending it all, going, oopsie, I've got no money now. And then,
I'm still very much that person.
Yeah. High five, me too.
I'm like, look, but I'm just...
No, exactly, yeah. I love riding that overdraft. So for me, there's there is an absolute responsibility there for them to have appropriate training.
Agreed.
Secondly, there is a need for services. So, absolutely services need to exist. We know that they don't. But then there is a characteristic that I think a PA and aftercare advisor needs, and that's the characteristic of the hustle. Right. They need to be there was a piece of research done from a university called the 21st Century Public Servant. It's a university that you and I have both been affiliated with in the past.
Oh, okay.
And it was about there's 7 dynamics to it. I would really recommend anybody. In fact, I might put the link in this
You're doing that
down here,
down the bottom.
Down here.
Are we going to have that? Sorry.
Yeah, because it'll be on YouTube and stuff. Which is being a community, being a systems navigator, being a community, navigating the community. So I think that aftercare advisors need to be community people. Absolutely. They need to know their local coffee shop owner. They need to be connected into the local community so that they can actually advocate for these young people. They can go out into the community. They can source. They can broker opportunities. They've got relationships in the community, because that's where the young person's going. That to me is the characteristic that is needed for a PA, is the kind of the 21st century public servant, but the hustle, they need to hustle. And then the other 2 things, obviously, appropriate training and also services and systems that are there to support care leavers.
And I think just to give aftercare advisors or personal advisors, again, more grace, there's an argument for, if all of that was done with all that time you had with them in care, but I've only got this short of the time with them now, maybe the outcomes would be different, because there is, and I do have to say, there's this, sometimes the care journey looks like, well, that's not our job, that'll be looked at later on, and actually our job is this and this and this, and we're so consumed with all of those things that we forget that comes very fast.
Well, the law is that you have to give young people appropriate time to leave care, and I think pretty much it is worded in that format. If I'm wrong, I'm happy with that too, but I know that in law, it's somewhere it states that we have to give them appropriate time. But when you look at that language, what is appropriate? I know a council that we once worked with where we actually mapped out the level of time it took to leave in care based on the age of when that child got assigned a PA.
Yeah.
And what we noticed is that it was taking them longer to leave care than it was from the time that they got assigned and when they hit 18 when they left care. Let's say that they get, they've got 6 months for an assigned worker and it's taken 18 months to leave.
Yeah.
So we notice actually that young people need a much longer lead-up time. It is not just a responsibility of the PA, it's also the social worker, placements that can support with that. But I think we're both in agreement that leaving care requires a deeper look. Yeah. So
I would be interested, just before we wrap up, if there are leaving care advisors right now in this current landscape, and what are the challenges for them. Again, it's another arena that I just don't think we're hearing enough about from leaving care advisors, about what it's like for them in this climate.
Well, let's end on that. Let's end on a call to action to PAs, aftercare advisors that are out there. We want to hear from them. So please do send us comments. Let us know what the experience is like. Yeah, send it to the care leaders. And because we'd be interested in actually maybe having a further conversation on this topic.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, Karyell, nice one.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.